mentioned last time, a statistically ridiculous number of people died before the glorious 90s synth stabs of after-war Gundam X's opening credits, a show that I erroneously said was the first in a long line of alternate timelines that fork off, branch out, completely separate, get more serious, get less serious, converge everything in on itself again, lose their way, and find it again within the 35-year history of the Gundam franchise. It's actually the third, but one thing I did get right is that just about everyone is dead, in what has to be a record for death toll before an opening title card of any kind of series. Now, I know this is all very sad and everything, what with your favorite bar being crushed underneath the rubble of what used to be a gigantic apartment complex in the sky, but would this have actually happened if physics and things were accounted for? That's why, before we talk about Gunpla today, we're going to talk about math. How's that for entertainment? The question here is simple enough. How many colonies would it take to commit this many billions of murders? Well, let's start with the weaponized space-bound apartment complex projectiles themselves. Cylindrical colonies such as those dropped in this war averaged about 6.4 kilometers in diameter and were 36 kilometers or so in length. For scale, the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was roughly 10 kilometers in diameter. The difference here is that the asteroid that killed said dinosaurs, known as the Chiclet Impactor, was traveling 20 kilometers per second, or 44,640 miles an hour. So it only took one of these things to wipe out a significant amount of life on this very planet you and I are currently living on. Mass colony drop implies many colonies, so let's see just how many colonies it would have taken to kill that many humans. One of the more straightforward ways to measure this, primarily because I'm no physicist and I was mildly tipsy while I researched this, is against the big bad weapons we have today, and that's nukes. The most powerful active nuclear warhead in the world is the B-83, which has the destructive capacity of about 200 of the bombs dropped on Hiroshima. These bombs have a total destruction area of 14.9 square kilometers, which is about a quarter of the size of Manhattan. Now, we're not factoring fallout here, just total the Earth is now glass style annihilation. It would take 1,241,166 of these bombs to wipe out the entirety of humanity in an instant, based on the bits of the Earth where humans live, which admittedly is a lot. Each of these bombs produced the destructive capacity of 1.2 megatons of TNT. So to kill 99% of humanity on Earth, it would take the impact force of enough colonies to create a 1,474,505 megaton impact. For scale, the Chiclet Impactor, the dinosaur thing, generated roughly 100 million megatons. Largely because it was in space for most of the time and terminal velocity doesn't have as much of an effect whenever you're in a vacuum, thanks to drag coefficients and things. Now, granted, that was all in one place, somewhere around Cuba or something, I'm really not sure. But if that kind of blast was spread across the entire planet and we were around 65 million years ago, we would be screwed literally 100 times over. If we estimate that the average volume of a space colony is occupied in its entirety at 8 kilograms per meters cubed, considering empty space and fluctuation, the average space colony would weigh 11,796,480,000,000 kilograms. This means that, at an orbit of 20,000 kilometers above the Earth, the colony's velocity at point of impact would come out to be about 19,798 meters a second if the Earth had no air on it. Since it does, we have to factor in air resistance and drag coefficients. Stay with me, we're almost done. Since the surface area of these cylinders is 1,705.01 kilometers squared, and we can figure in the drag coefficient estimate of 2.1, which is about what a brick falling through the sky has, the fastest one of these colonies could fall to Earth is just 284.206 meters per second. This all means that at the point of impact, one single colony would have an impact force of 11.387 megatons, which is a lot. However, this means that, according to my admittedly crude math, it would take the mass of 129,490 colonies to kill all of humanity. And since some weigh less and some weigh more, and some people would be off Earth at the time, it's likely that 1% would survive the impact. This is just based on weight, however. These things are likely to be loaded with myriad power systems and other things that probably wouldn't take lightly to being jostled around in Earth's atmosphere and suddenly stopping when it meets the ground. So in reality, it probably wouldn't take this many. At this point, I'd like to mention that I was never good at math, so I probably mixed something up somewhere. But nevertheless, I don't think any of you came here to listen to me drone on about a thought experiment that came up in a bar one day. You came here to look at tiny models of giant war machines. And over the last couple of weeks, and a significant amount of white Tamiya acrylics later, we have our monument to mass genocide. The GX-9900 Gundam X Monument Frame. This master-grade kit has now been coated in whiteness and has since been streaked over and over with a mixture of Tamiya smoke paint and water to somewhat mimic the effects of marble. Overall, I'm far happier with this kit than my last attempt at customization, the EFSF Multipurpose Mobile Suit GP01 Gundam Zephyranthus Full Burner Martini, largely because it's a more complete customization than just a few stickers placed haphazardly on the kit. The biggest challenge with the paint job was the edges. While the paint job overall was somewhat simple to do, hand painting with thinned acrylics means that the paint had a hell of a time with the edges of parts. The paint likes to pull away from direct edges, which means that I had to go over them multiple times before the paint could stick. Plus, due to the mixture of water and straight acrylic used for streaking, something that you're not technically supposed to do, my stupid thin pinstriping brush that I used for streaking kept getting gunked up with the dried paint because the brush was so thin. It's also the first custom paint job I've done where I had an idea of what I wanted to do when I bought the kit, something that I can't say about the first time that I attempted a custom paint job. The OZ-00MS Tallgeese from Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, nicknamed the Iron Centurion. This was my first master grade kit, and it was assembled and painted a few months before I decided to make videos on the internet. I stumbled across some really neat copper paint in my local hobby shop one day and thought, let's do something with it, and went nuts with a bunch of different color combinations. It was an experiment at the end of the day, and overall I'm really happy with it. However, the kit refuses outright to cooperate with any sort of pose in any way. The shield, for example, is held in place solely by wishful thinking and me yelling at it a bunch. And the gun has a personality disorder that makes it want to break the hand that holds it every time it is moved, touched, glanced at, or thought about in any way. That's not to say the Gundam X is without its issues either. The big satellite cannon, for example, mounted to the kit by absolutely nothing at all. It balances inside of the notch in its backpack fins where it's supposed to be mounted by a piece I broke in its V-fin. As you can imagine, this limits its posability somewhat, which isn't much of an issue since statues don't typically move unless you're watching Doctor Who. The smooth, glossy, monochromatic Master Grade looks great on my shelf along with the rest of the kits we worked on, and I definitely plan on doing more in this style. But for now, I kinda still have a Barbatos that needs more nail polish slathered on it, so I'm gonna get back to making more bad Gunpla. See you next time.